This is not breaking news. This is not a scandal. This is not about one person. This is about something quieter and more dangerous. What happens when a government stops treating money as policy and starts treating it as permission? When public funding is no longer neutral, when it begins to move conditionally, reward here, withhold there, not because the law changed, not because Congress decided, but because loyalty became measurable. At first, it looks technical. Budget adjustments, administrative discretion, routine governance. But this isn't about efficiency. It's about control. And once control becomes the objective, every institution has to choose whether it absorbs the pressure or resists it. Some already have. If this feels abstract, stay with me. Because what's unfolding isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It moves through systems, and it's accelerating. If you want to understand how power really works right now, you need the next piece. You're told this is about leadership, about tone, about style. It isn't. What actually controls the system now is leverage, not votes, not laws. Leverage, specifically, the ability to decide whether money moves or stalls, whether programs breathe or suffocate, whether compliance is rewarded and distance is punished. That power was never supposed to live in one place. It was designed to be slow, distributed, boring. But something shifted. Funding stopped behaving like infrastructure and started behaving like a signal. A message sent through spreadsheets instead of speeches. The system didn't announce the change. It normalized it. And when leverage replaces governance, every relationship becomes conditional. States, agencies, organizations, even expertise. This isn't a breakdown. It's a reconfiguration. And the most dangerous part is that it looks procedural while it's happening, because once this logic sets in, the system doesn't fail all at once. It tests boundaries quietly, one pressure point at a time. That's where this goes next. Here's the part most people missed. None of this happened overnight. There was a before, and now there is this before. Federal money moved slowly, predictably, almost boringly. States planned years ahead. Agencies operated on assumptions that didn't change with elections. Now, the ground shifts mid-step, funds appear, pause, disappear, then reappear somewhere else, not randomly, not accidentally. The change was subtle enough to feel administrative. A delay here, a review there, a justification written after the fact. That's how normalization works. It doesn't arrive as a rupture. It arrives as process, and slow change is the most dangerous kind. Because people adapt before they resist, institutions begin to hedge, to soften language, to anticipate punishment without being told. This is how leverage spreads without being declared. And once enough actors adjust their behavior, the shift becomes invisible, but the system remembers what it's responding to. And eventually, something pushes back. That moment is next. Then the system flinched. Not in theory, in money. Funding already approved, already allocated, suddenly stopped. Clean energy dollars vanished from some states and not others. Childcare funds froze midstream. Social services stalled. The pattern wasn't subtle. The distinction wasn't technical. It tracked behavior. Electoral behavior. This wasn't a budget fight. Congress had already spoken. This was something else. An attempt to redraw the map of federal support after the vote was counted. And for a moment, it worked. Projects paused. States scrambled. Organizations recalculated. If you were watching closely, this is where the system could have tipped. But instead, something unusual happened. The response was immediate, blunt, almost impatient. The funding didn't just get questioned, it got blocked from being blocked. The message wasn't political. It was structural. You can't do that. If you think this ends the story, don't look away. Because this wasn't the failure of the strategy, it was the stress test. And what the system did next changed the pace of everything. Here's how it actually works. Not the speeches, not the explanations. The mechanism is simple. Money moves last. Pressure comes first. Funds are announced, then delayed, then reviewed, then questioned. Each step is defensible on paper. Together, they create uncertainty. And uncertainty does the work. States don't need to be told to comply. Agencies don't need explicit threats. Organizations don't need memos. They feel the drag. Budgets depend on timing. Payroll depends on predictability. Projects depend on confidence. So who benefits? The center does. The place where decisions bottleneck, where exceptions are granted, where relief can be selectively restored. And who absorbs the damage? Everyone downstream. Families waiting on services, workers on paused projects, communities caught mid-build. The system doesn't collapse, it flex. And in that flex, behavior changes. The key insight is this: you don't need to win every fight. You just need to make resistance expensive. That's the mechanism. But mechanisms don't operate in isolation. They provoke responses. And the response that came next was faster than anyone expected. Then it sped up. Rulings landed one after another. No long opinions. No patience for theatrics. Just decisions. Stop. Restore. You can't freeze that. You don't have that authority. Energy projects resumed. Childcare money unfroze. Infrastructure moved again. Not eventually. Immediately. The language changed too. Judges stopped explaining. They started instructing. What once required careful argument now took a paragraph. Because the pattern was no longer new. The system recognized itself being tested. And once recognition happens, response time collapses. What used to be a gamble became a dead end. Every attempt to apply pressure triggered faster resistance. Every delay exposed intent. And intent, once visible, is impossible to unsee. This is the moment leverage stopped compounding and started rebounding. But here's the part that matters. This didn't weaken the strategy quietly. It forced it to mutate. And when pressure stops working in one direction, it doesn't disappear. It looks for another path. That turn is already underway. Here's where this reaches you. Not as theory, as friction. When funding freezes, services hesitate. Appointments move. Programs shrink. Costs shift. You don't get a memo explaining why. You just feel the delay. Childcare becomes harder to find. Health coverage becomes more expensive. Projects you were counting on suddenly feel provisional. This is what leverage looks like at ground level. It never says your name. It just changes the terms. And when institutions start bracing for punishment, they pass the risk downstream. To you, that's the quiet consequence of conditional governance. It teaches systems to protect themselves by letting individuals absorb the shock. If this feels familiar, that's not an accident. Because once this logic is introduced, it doesn't stay confined to one sector. It spreads across agencies, across states, across expectations. If you want to understand where this goes next and why it doesn't stop at national borders, stay with me. This is bigger than a domestic fight now. Here's what happens when a system like this becomes visible. Other systems take notes. Allies watch how funds are treated, how commitments behave under pressure, how quickly rules bend, because federal money doesn't stop at state lines. It anchors research partnerships, supply chains, energy markets, health data, weather forecasts. When predictability weakens at the center, it ripples outward. Projects slow overseas, contracts get cautious, coordination frays. Not because anyone panics, because risk gets repriced. And once trust becomes conditional, every partner starts building contingencies, that's when domestic instability turns systemic. What looked like an internal power struggle becomes a signal to the outside world about whether commitments here actually hold. The irony is this: the harder pressure is applied inward, the less leverage exists outward. Because credibility can't be enforced. It's either there or it isn't. And once doubt enters the system, it doesn't move in straight lines. It multiplies. Which brings us to the future phase. Not what will happen, but what could. From here, the system has three possible trajectories. Not outcomes, paths. The first is adjustment. The pressure backs off. The mechanism remains, but unused. Institutions harden their guardrails. Courts stay fast. Congress stays alert. The system absorbs the shock and keeps moving. The second is erosion, not collapse, where each confrontation leaves residue, delays return under new names. Compliance becomes cautious. Innovation slows. Nothing breaks dramatically. It just costs more to operate than it used to. And then there's rupture. That's when containment fails. When leverage finds a path the courts can't block fast enough. When legislative math shifts again, when retaliation stops being financial and becomes structural. This is the least likely path until it isn't. The danger isn't that one of these happens tomorrow. It's that the system is now moving faster between them. Adjustment can slide into erosion. Erosion can tip into rupture. And none of these transitions announce themselves in advance, which is why the final question isn't about intent. It's about capacity and whether the system can keep up with the speed it's being forced to operate at. Here's the uncomfortable part. The system held. This time, courts moved fast. Congress pushed back. Institutions adapted. But resilience is not immunity. Every time a system has to defend itself, it spends capacity, attention, speed, trust, and none of those replenish automatically. What you've been watching isn't a victory. It's a containment effort, a live demonstration of how close the machinery can get to being repurposed before something snaps it back into place. The danger isn't that this already failed. It's that now everyone knows how far it can be pushed. And next time, the test won't look the same. Different pressure point, different justification, same logic. If you want to understand what happens when containment becomes the norm, instead of the exception, that's where we're going next. Because systems don't announce their breaking points. They reveal them only after you've crossed them. Stay with me.